Hello lovely ones, and today we are all about the runes. Well, actually we're about the Rune Vision Cards, which I'm going to share with you today. We're going to have a walk through the deck, and I'll say a little bit about the deck and why I bought it, and yes, we'll just discuss what's in here, and we'll perhaps talk a little bit about the runes as well. I suppose I should say though that I'm not actually much of a rune scholar, despite the fact that I've got my trusty rune ring on. But I did get into the runes briefly when I first got into tarot. Those of you who watched my Tarot of the Old Path video, which is the video about my first deck, will know that I first got that deck because I was introduced to the tarot by somebody at university. And that person also had a bag of runes, and we would sit and read tarot cards and pull the runes and have a great time, really. And so yes, I developed a bit of a fascination with the runes briefly, although over the years I haven't used them nearly as much as with the tarot cards. Obviously, the tarot I use on a regular basis for personal development, self-development, and also in my coaching practice. I don't do that with the runes, or at least I very rarely use them for myself, and I don't use them at all really in my coaching practice. Having said that, I did actually make myself some runes not long after I first got into tarot and was introduced to runes, and I'll share those with you now before we go into the Rune Vision cards. And in the bag is my little handy aide-memoire of runes, which I wrote myself. I made these runes when I was, well, I guess I must have been about 19 years old. I was at university, 18 or 19 years old, and I made them by picking pebbles from Aberdeen Beach. Now, before you tell me, I know that is not a good thing to do now. I know, coastal erosion, but I didn't know at the time. I was 19, I was young, I was foolish, and so I went to Aberdeen Beach and I picked some lovely pebbles. And I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see in this light, but what I did was I actually put gold pen on the pebbles. It's beginning to fade a bit. What I really need to do actually is to go over these again, either in more gold or perhaps with a more prominent colour, and then also to varnish them. But yes, these runes are all authentic runes from Aberdeen Beach circa, what, 1991 or something. Yes, I'm quite fond of these because of course they were made by me, and I went through and worked out exactly which rune should go on which stone, and spent time making the marks on the stones, and I've had them all these years, so they're a nice thing to have. They're a nice thing to have, although as I say, I'm not much of a rune scholar. But going back to the Rune Vision deck, and actually there is a connection between this deck and my first tarot deck, because Tarot of the Old Path was created by the same creators as created this deck. Sylvia Gainsford, the artist, and Howard Rodway, the writer. And just so you are aware of what it says here, the runic alphabet was created 2,000 years ago by the Germanic peoples of Northern Europe. It is steeped in magic and mysticism, encompassing this ancient culture's belief and traditions, from the everyday to their most sacred. The runic oracle was used to enlist the powerful influence of the Norse gods and goddesses that it represented. Now, you can do the same using the book and cards contained in this pack. And actually, the creators of the deck also created a tarot deck called Tarot of the Northern Shadows, so they clearly have some affinity with kind of northern Nordic paganism. What you get in the box is a book which has information about each of the runes and each of the cards, and it has illustrations. I won't show you them now because we're about to go through the cards, and it has details of each of the cards and the runes on it. Quite a substantial book actually. It runs to 159 pages and includes information about how to read the cards, different spreads, and some of the history of the runes, so that's rather nice. The cards themselves have this back, which is in my edition, which is 2008 from AGM, yellow backs with runes around the perimeter of the cards. I know that there is an earlier edition, I think, which has purple dragons on the back, or a purple dragon. I know this from a friend in the For Love of Cards Facebook group who was speaking about her cards, and she has a purple dragon. And I was thinking, why don't I have a purple dragon? But I have runes instead. That's okay. That's okay. So, on to the cards. Now, the first thing to say is that there is a degree of controversy around these cards, because if you read reviews, you will find that whilst people are generally very complimentary about the artwork, although some people are kind of dismissive of it, people who are rune scholars and who are really into the runes take issue with some of the associations that have been drawn between specific runes and specific gods and goddesses, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So just so you're aware, that is something to think about if you're choosing perhaps to get these runes or get these cards as a way of learning the runes. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. It may well be that what you'll find is that when you then go on to more traditional works on the runes, that you discover that actually the associations aren't the same. So if that's going to be off-putting, be aware. So in terms of the structure of the deck, what the authors say is that different sets of runes belong to different gods and goddesses. So the first set of runes, for example, runes 1 to 8, belong to the goddess Freya, according to this. And that might well have a bearing on why they've chosen particular signs and symbols for each rune. So what we'll do is we'll just go through the runes, and then I'll stop and talk about a couple of them. But this is mainly so you can see the artwork on the cards. So, you know, as I say, for my money, this is really gorgeous artwork. I always loved the artwork in Tarot of the Old Path, and I really love the artwork in this deck as well. Sylvia Gainsford. I also have ordered her Kabbalah cards, which I hope to get soon, and I'll certainly do a walkthrough of those once I've got them, because again they look really striking, really beautiful. So much detail and lovely colours in these cards. So here is a card that's maybe worth talking about. Let's just first of all let you see the artwork. So this is the rune Thurisaz, and in a number of books about the runes, including some of the books I have, this rune is associated not just with the god Loki, as it is here, but also or mainly with the god Thor. And in fact, in some runic books, the meaning of Thurisaz is thorn, and it's related to the word Thor. So the problem here for some people will be that if they associate this rune with Thor and they see Loki in the card, it's going to be kind of jarring. So, and I understand that. My take on that would be, one, I probably wouldn't use these as a way of learning the runes as a beginning approach. Two, I would approach this in a open-minded and eclectic way. So if this, I'm not even sure how I would use these cards in readings, but if I were to use these in readings and this came up, here's what I would probably do. One, I would look at the image in the context of the reading, and I would ask myself, what does this image intuitively say to me? And there are things here, obviously, that are going to stimulate some thought. There's the dagger here, there's the snake, there's the icy mountains, there's the water, there's the kneeling figure of the man, naked, on his knees, staring kind of partly into the distance, eyes half closed. There is a berry of some sort there. You know, it's a dark sky. What does this tell me? What does the image itself tell me? Then what I might say is, okay, I know that this is the rune Thurisaz. So what do I know about that rune? And I'd go and look up the rune in a guidebook, or if I have some information in my own memory about the rune, I would use that. And then also I'd ask myself, well, what do I know about the god Loki? What does that mean in the context of this reading? So I think you can approach this in a number of different ways. And although I can understand that if the image and the rune association doesn't work for you, that could be very off-putting. In another sense, it might be possible to actually look at the different elements of the cards as different stimuli for your intuition. From my own point of view, really I got these cards because I like the artwork. So at this stage, I'm not too bothered. Now, the other thing to note, of course, as we go through these cards, is that each of the cards, as well as the rune, has got the related deity, and here we have Thor, who traditionally is associated with Thurisaz, but here is associated with Rado. But you'll see, as we go through, that each of these cards has got the rune, the deity, and also an animal and a plant association. And my understanding is that what the authors have done is they have taken animals and plants who are associated with particular deities or with particular runes and added them into the card, which adds a nice element. So if you're into animal oracles or plant oracles, then there is an element of both in this deck, in addition to the deities and in addition to the runes. And one way of looking at it would be asking yourself if you agree with some of the associations that have been made, or do you instead want to see them as connected and complementary, but not necessarily fully associated wholes. You know, it's possible to see them individually as well as separately. So I think what we'll do is we will actually take a look in the book about one of these cards. So let's pick this one, Isa, the goddess Skadi. So here's what it says in the book about this. So the meaning of the symbol, it says, is ice. The snowy, icebound Norwegian landscape features the Trollheimen range of mountains which rise chill beneath the dark winter sky. The giant goddess Skadi rests, curled and sleeping, her body shaping part of the snow-covered slopes as her form rises into the sky. Skadi's hair flows on either side of her face like windswept clouds. The restful features, with eyes closed, merge into shadow. Her arms fold protectively toward her breasts. Her hips turn to her left. The lower line of her thigh forms the contour of the lower slope, before which the diminutive figure of a traveller moves on skis as he pulls a sled. In the foreground is a reindeer, the totem animal of Isa. This familiar winter symbol is in a number of old world cultures is seen here with its head down to show the spread of antlers. To the lower left, a sprig of alder expresses the tree identified with this rune. To the right is the Isa symbol, shown in its associated colour of black. And then we have a section on the goddess herself. Skadi, the winter goddess, was the very beautiful daughter of Thijazi. She married the god Njord, who liked to live by the seashore at Nauaton, and hear the waves crashing and the gulls crying. Skadi, though, preferred the wolves, wind, snow, and icy mountain peaks of Thermheim. I should have practiced this before reading it, really, but here we go. Thermheim. Eventually, Njord consented to live with her at Thermheim for 9 nights out of every 12. She would live with him at Noaton for the remaining 3 nights, so these two became the Scandinavian symbols of winter and summer, 9 months for winter and 3 for summer. The divinatory emphasis of this rune is of progress being blocked. An expression of such a situation is symbolised by the behaviour of Skadi, who held an overwhelming grievance against Thor for killing her father Thijazi. Such was Skadi's obsessive hatred that it prevented her from thinking about anything in a balanced manner. The god's solution to relieving her blocked mental state was to allow her to choose a husband and then find a way to make Skadi laugh. This was a difficult task considering the mood of the Ice Maiden goddess, but Loki the prankster succeeded and the problem was solved. And then there's a section on the different symbols and meanings. So ice, reinforced, ski, sled, reindeer, Skadi, alder, black, a divinatory significance, taking a step backward, withdrawn, progress halted, a chill response, a parting, a lack of drive, and then reversed, infidelity and treachery. And in a card layout, Isa reinforces adjacent runes. So I'm actually going to read also from another book. Now, I'm not in any way going to claim that this is a great book on runes. I don't really know one way or the other, and I'm sure someone will look at it and go, oh no, that's not that one, that's not a good one. But I just want to read you what this book says about that same rune, just to see, or just to demonstrate whether there is in fact any correlation between the two. Because I think one of the criticisms that I've read about this deck is that some of the runes and the goddesses don't seem to match. But certainly the meaning that they've given here of this rune and the meaning of the goddess seem to match quite well. And in this book it says, at first glance one might assume that this rune is rather forbidding, as ice is obviously very cold and may be highly dangerous. That does not tell the whole story, however. Ice may in fact be protective. Indeed, we use the expression put on ice to indicate that we want to store something away for later use. This rune counsels caution. The best course of action for the querent is no action. This is the moment to stop and metaphorically freeze all plans, as to continue could be foolhardy, like stepping out onto ice. So, not entirely worlds apart in the interpretations. So moving on, we have JIRA, and let's just look a bit more at the images. Again, just lovely artwork, and for me a great jumping off point. Gorgeous colour here. A great jumping off point to learn about the runes, of course, themselves, and I would suggest that you don't just stick with the booklet in this deck, but that you go a bit further and look into other rune lore. But also a good opportunity to look at animal totems that relate to the concepts being expressed here, and also plant totems. And as I say, if you're a fan of animal and plant oracle decks, then there are some gorgeous animal and plant images in this deck. So, now this is an interesting one for me, because I believe, and I'm not sure why I believe, this is my rune. Now I think partly it's because in some texts this is the rune that equates to the letter B in the alphabet that I would use, and of course B is my initial. But I think there's another reason as well. I can't remember why. It might be related to my birth date or something, so a bit like a tarot soul card. I'd need to remind myself of why that was. But anyway, I've always associated this rune with myself, and this is a rune that relates to growth. And what's kind of interesting is that when I got this deck and I first looked at the cards, they were in order in the deck as I put them now. So I shuffled them and shuffled them and shuffled them, shuffled them, and I did a one card draw to just ask the deck, you know, what is this deck about for me? And this is the card that came out. So that was fine. I didn't think much more of that. Went about my business. Later on in the day, at the end of the day, I decided to pull a rune to just reflect on the day that had just gone, and this is what came out. And so then I took my rune book to see what this book said on that rune, and I opened the book and it fell open at Berkana. And then I picked up the Rune Vision Cards book and opened it up to start looking for this rune, and without having to go anywhere, I opened it up and it fell open at Berkana. So make of that what you will. So the other nice thing, we're nearly at the end of the deck, and the nice thing here is that, you know, there are 25 cards, 26 if you count the controversial blank rune which is in the deck, and I know that some people don't approve, but it's there. You don't have to use it, but it's there. But you know, with 25 cards, it's actually not going to be too difficult to really get to know each one of these cards and to study it. And the nice thing, of course, is that it won't take as much time. If you get a new tarot deck, as lovely as tarot decks of course are, we've got 78 cards very often to plough through. If it's an illustrated pip deck, then very often we've got all kinds of new symbolism and imagery to consider, which can be great fun and very wonderful, but also can be quite daunting. Here we've got 25 cards, and that's it. And so in a sense it gives us time to really reflect on each one. And here we have the final blank rune. And the blank rune, you know, is well known that there was no blank rune in the original runic alphabet. That was added in northern times, so of course you don't need to use that. You could just use the runes or the rune cards that we have here. So there we have it, the rune cards, and as I say, it's a great delight for me to have these because I love Tarot of the Old Path so much, and I definitely feel some of the feelings that I felt when I first got that deck and looking at these images. I recognise the artwork, I can see a commonality in the artwork, and yet it's very different to the artwork on Tarot of the Old Path. But it's nice to be reminded of how I first felt when I received that deck. So yes, this is a nice little set. Not perfect, certainly not terribly consistently authentic from a runic scholarly point of view, but a nice art deck, a nice one for the collection, and I'm very pleased with it. So I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough, and I'll be back again, no doubt, very soon. Take care.